So last week we actually started with security awareness training, all right, which is the 5.10. All right, so we started the part B last week. The goal is this, so just to put it in context, is that we want to cover the part B, then we'll go back. We started from part A when we started the course, right? So we will go back to part A and then run it down again so that you have a full experience. The goal is to try to touch as many points as possible. And for me, I wanted to touch this because it's easier to bring to us. It's things that we can relate with. There are things that we've handled one way or the other. All right, so it shouldn't be a big deal. All right, handling it. That's the reason why we went this direction. So when we talked about security awareness and security awareness training and programs, we actually made a distinction between awareness and trainings. We tried to see what are their differences, and we said that basically you can break it down based on their target audience, the learning style, the duration, and also the technique. All right, and so for security awareness, we said it's basically directed towards or promoting a change in behavior, creating a culture of good security practice, and it's not something that is you need to be actively involved in. It could be passive, it could be a short cartoon, it could be just a one-page slide that telling you never share your PIN with anybody. It's an awareness. All right, you don't expect the person who is getting an awareness to be a professional in security. Then the duration, it can start from the point of hiring, and it should be done, on a regular basis. You need to remind them. And we said the techniques we can use can vary depending on the how we are able to excite the people's mind, to take away boredom, to help them experience it. All right, then for security training, we said it's a more formal type of training. All right, it's directed towards people with relevant skills like your IT security professional or IT admin, people who will actually handle security. And we said basically it's to build their knowledge, skills, their competence in their functional areas, in specific function areas. And we said an example would be an ISACA security course for security administrators, which will cover implementing control and the likes. And we talked about for education, it's now more intensive than training. So we did a distinction between awareness training and then education. Education is more intensive. The target audience are security professionals whose job actually require a very deep expertise in security. And we said the purpose of education basically is for those seeking careers in information security. And you'll get this kind of trainings in colleges, universities, specialized program, maybe a Coursera program. It could be a master's program in security, but this is an in-depth look into information security education. So most times at our place of work, what we get is awareness and trainings for those within the IT security or audit fields. But the education, most times you have to get it on your own because it costs more. All right. So basically, it integrates various security skills, multidisciplinary body of knowledge and the like. So these are things we covered in our class last week. So look at here, we talked about aim to change behavior for security awareness. For security training, you teach employees skills that they need to perform their job more securely. So people who are practitioners to build knowledge. And when it comes to education, we said it's more intensive than training. Integrates security competencies to produce multidisciplinary body of knowledge on information security. Then here, so approaches to security awareness training and education, your ATE. So who is the intended audience? And I think that's one of the things I explained. The intended audience, what's the intended message, what's the intended result, what communication method will be used, what's the organizational structure and culture. All of these will determine how we proceed. All right, so when you're crafting your security awareness training or education, you need to answer these 5 questions. Who are those that we need to train? Or who are those that this message is meant for? So depending on the audience, you can either say, okay, what they need is an awareness education or an awareness program, or if it's for skilled professionals, practitioners within the organization, you might say, okay, they need to gain this particular skill to be able to do their job. All right, so you do an intensive training for them, or maybe you sponsor some of your staff to do in an educational program. Maybe they are running a master's program, or they are doing a particular certification like your CEH or OSCP and the likes, that has to do with information security. And you know it will also dovetail back into their work in the office. All right, so those are things that we need to consider when we are designing our awareness training and education. Now, that's more or less like a summary of the awareness training and communication. So if you look at this question, let me just throw it out to us. I think we have more people in class now. And it says, which of the following is the best way for an IS auditor to determine the effectiveness of a security awareness and training program? A, it says review the security training program. B, ask the security administrator. C, interview a sample of employees. D, review the security reminders to employees. What do we think the answer should be?
I'm thinking A.
Why A? Well, our method of answering question. Maybe
yes, we eliminate 2 that we think is not okay. Then we give
justify why.
Yes. Okay, so for me to determine the effectiveness of security awareness and training program, I can review the security training program. Determine the effectiveness. Oh, I see. Okay, this thing. Ask the security administrator, interview a sample of employees, review the security reminders. Okay. This is dicey. I said A, but I think C might be better. Because when we are looking at effectiveness of the security awareness and training program, it means that we've already deployed those trainings, and we're now checking if it's actually effective and it's benefiting to the employees. So I think C will be better based on that fact that we want to look into the effectiveness of the training program that we've done and the security awareness. So it's better I sample the opinion of some people, the employees, to see if things are working well or not.
Okay. Any other person wants to give us their own insights? So we know that the 2 that were considered by Folashade is A and C, but she opted for C because C would give an objective way of knowing if it's effective or not. At least that's the argument. Any other person?
For me, I think I go for C.
Okay, let me do. Thank you. And what's your justification for C?
Because I think that's how you'll be able to see if, be able to test based on the training, test how the employees have been able to absorb what you've trained them on, and if they really actually got it correctly.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll just go a slide backwards. So look at here, when you talk about the approach to security awareness and training, we said we need to ask these 5 questions. Who is the intended audience? What's the intended message? What's the intended results? And what's the communication method that will be used? And what's the organizational structure and culture? Now, if we want to know if our program is successful, it would be, are we getting the intended results? Are the people now, has there been a change in the culture, assuming the goal, the intended goal or the intended message was to lead to a shift in culture? All right. Then how did we communicate this program to the people? So for example, we know that the option A is a good approach, reviewing security training programs, but you can have a very good security training program, but it's communicated poorly, which means that you can review the program and feel, wow, this program is sufficient. But if the communication of that program was done poorly, we won't get the intended results as expected. All right. So yes, C would be our preferred answer. Any question? So this is just more like a revision of what we did last week. We just backtracking a little bit so that we can move forward. Any questions so far? Okay. So I assume there are no questions then. So we said conducting a need assessment. We looked at the different roles last week. Your executive management needs are different from information security personnel, different from system owners, from administrators, and from operational staff. So your program or your training or education has to be targeted to the appropriate audience. You don't give the same level of training or awareness to everybody. It has to be based on their needs. And that's why we need to consider every role. In implementing our awareness and training program, we explained last week we need to define the program scope, select the training staff, identify the audience or the target audience. We need to motivate management and employees. I mean, we need to drive it. We need to create and we need to sensitize the people, and it starts from management. Then we need to administer the program, then maintain the program, then the evaluation, which is from the perspective where that question came, to see is this program that we have rolled out, how effective is it? Are we getting the required numbers? For example, if we pushed out an awareness campaign on phishing attacks, the question would be how many of our employees still click on phishing mails, simulated phishing mails by our information security team. Now, if the numbers reduces or has reduced significantly, then the program is working. But if the number does not reduce, but rather increases or even remains the same, then even if we have a wonderful presentation, a wonderful, what I call it now, maybe a cartoon or something that we're using, in pushing that program out, as long as it's not resulting in the intended objective of reduction of those phishing mails, then it is not optimal. Then we need to go back and then review our processes. Maybe we missed something or we communicated it wrongly, or we need to check back into those 5 steps and see what did we do wrong, what can we do better to ensure that we achieve the desired goals. All right. Now, so we would quickly move to information system attack methods and techniques. We also started this last week. We talked about different types of attacks. We actually spent a lot of time on this. Well, hopefully we should be able to make traction and move quite fast. And let's see. Please reach out to me if you have questions. As much as possible, I would keep interjecting and asking if there are any questions. And if you do not have questions, please just unmute yourself and say no. If you have questions, still unmute yourself and just ask your question. The truth is, there's little or nothing I can do without the right questions. The presentation is presented in such a way that I'm answering questions that you should have or you might have. So in that way, most likely some of your primary questions would have been answered. But also, it's possible that I do not even touch the questions that you have in mind. So, and there's no way I would, I would know if I'm touching it or not. So I would appreciate if you can just let me know when you have questions that has not been answered, and I would give it my best shot to give you an answer. And if I don't have an answer, I would also tell you, and I will get back to you once I'm able to get it. So I'm not claiming to be an arbiter of all answers. All right, so that being said, let's move ahead with the information system attack methods. When we looked at it that last week, we talked about the fraud triangle. I tried to explain, at least from my perspective and experience as a fraud manager, and I said that for any fraud to be successful, all of these three legs must be in place. There has to be a motivation, there has to be a perceived need. It could be that a child is in the hospital and you need to pay school fees, you need to pay rent. I mean, your landlord is threatening to send you out of the house. That's enough motivation if you do not have money, but you have the means. All right. So the motivation has to be there. There has to be a pressure on the individual who will commit fraud. There has to be something that they need urgently. All right. They need to buy Valentine gifts for their girlfriend, or she would leave the guy alone. I mean, what motivates us are different and varying. So there is no just one motivation for everybody, but we need to know that for any fraud to occur, there has to be a financial need, there has to be a pressure. For some, it's trying to measure up with colleagues and friends. You want to be, I mean, one of the best in town, right? But things are not the same. You hear the word that all fingers are not equal. I mean, anyone who wants to live a happy life has to live with that mindset that you are not competing with anybody. You are in a different class of your own. As long as you have that at the back of your mind, you will be contented with what you have and then strive for more, but not at the expense of your integrity or your sanity or your well-being. Okay, so we've talked about motivation, rationalization. For every fraudster, they will always justify their crimes to themselves. We all have conscience, and you hear that everybody has conscience, but some consciences are seared. That is, they are dull. They don't know the difference between good and bad again, and that's because they've told themselves that the world owes them something. Their manager owes them something. Their MD owes them something. I mean, I was in the banking industry for close to 9 or 10 years. Yeah. And I was in insurance for like 2 years thereabout. Okay. So, but the idea is this. In all of those years, I've seen different things happen. I've seen different things happen. I've seen people who are good guys turn bad. All right. I've seen people who you least expect commit fraud. In fact, there was a scenario where this guy was. It was when he was leaving the company. They knew. I mean, we knew how much damage he has done, and he moved to one of these big settlement companies, card companies in Nigeria, and he lost that job because of the fraud he has done in the bank. Because at the point, the way it is, your company will always ask for reference to validate your experience and other things. And since there was an investigation ongoing on him, his company was made to be aware, all right, of what they're dealing with. So, I mean, when it comes to fraud, they're saying that there has to be rationalization. You have to say, okay, they owe me something. I mean, in the bank, most times you don't get promoted every 2 years, even though that's the promise a lot of times. Say, okay, yeah, in the next 2 years at least, every 2 years at minimum, you'll be considered for promotion. But the economic realities are not smiling, so it might not happen. So I've seen people on the same level, or same level in bank for over 5, 10 years, and people that they started work with come back and become their manager, senior manager, and they are wondering, but we all started this banking journey together. But the truth is, the strategies we all employed were different. For some, they stay in one bank and expect that the bank will meet all of their needs, while others try to, just like yourselves, try to improve yourself and then go for better opportunities out there. I mean, just take the risk, apply for a job, go for the interviews, and you get the next level, then the next level. By the time you're going back to the company you once worked with, those that were entry level with you before, you are now, I mean, a manager or deputy manager or senior manager, and they are wondering, but we all started together. But the truth is, you took different paths. All right. So that person that feels like all his or her colleagues have left them behind will try to rationalize and say, but I mean, I deserve to earn as much as Mr. Y because we all started together. So for that reason, since I have access to the accounts, then let me help myself. So that rationalization is always there. Then the opportunity, the method which the crime can be committed, access to debit and credit accounts, access to be able to move money between accounts. Those are tellers or settlement guys, people in e-settlement. They are responsible for what do you call it now, chargebacks, refund of funds that were not successful and all of that. Rather than refund the funds to the actual customer whose account was debited wrongly, they move it to their own personal accounts. Because, I mean, the opportunity is there, they could do it. But then it's possible to have the opportunity, but if you are not motivated and you don't rationalize, you use your church mind or your monk's mind or your Ifa mind, whatever mind you have, all right, you find out that even if the opportunity is there, they won't do it. Now, but where we come to play as IT security professionals or an IS auditor is we need to limit the opportunity. I mean, we can't control the motivation that people have. I mean, we can't solve everybody's problem. Everybody, when you apply for a job, you agree to the salary they offered. If it was not okay for you, you could as well have said no and then move on to the next job. But as long as you agree to it, I mean, at that particular point in time, it's felt fair and okay with you. Then, so we can't control what the perceived financial need will be. We can't tell the landlord not to ask for his rent from his tenant. And for some of us, we have people who want to live in Lekki, wants to live in Yaba, where you are paying 1.5 million for room and parlor. And because it is 30 minutes or 20 minutes from the island. And then you can still move a little bit further to maybe Anokpaja, and you pay like 300 or 250 for that same kind of apartment, and it will take you like 1 hour or 45 minutes to get to work. So whatever the case is, we can't control motivation and rationalization. But when it comes to opportunity, that's where our own field of play is. So you talk about things like segregation of duties. One person should not be able to start and finish transactions, administrative, supervisory controls. All right, where even if someone can post, at the end of the day, the manager or the person who they report to review all of their tickets, what they've done. All right. And some of these controls can also be automated. So even if you post some transaction, for example, as what do you call it now, an e-settlement officer, and you map it to the wrong account that should have received it, if you have the right tools in the organization, there should be a flag thrown up to say that this particular customer who we intend to credit never had a corresponding debit in the first place. So these are the places where we have control over, and that is the opportunity. We need to reduce the opportunity landscape for fraud. And that's where all the controls come in, both technical, administrative, and the likes. All right. That being said, we looked at the various types of computer crime issues and exposures that threatens our business. Look at financial laws, legal repercussion, loss of credibility or competitive edge. If there is a fraud, if there is a cyber attack, our customers will lose confidence in us. All right. We lose our competitive edge. I mean, blackmail, industrial espionage, organized crime, and even disclosure of confidential, sensitive, and even embarrassing information also are all types of issues and exposures that is a threat to our business. Then also sabotage. We talked about the different computer crime activities. We looked at denial of service that last week. So here you say computer targets the crime, perpetrator uses another computer to launch attack. You have a target, which will be a specific computer is identified. We talked about denial of service. I think that last week also we talked about different ways of carrying out denial of service. We talked about the sync attack. We talked about So we talked about the sync attack. We talked about several other types of DOS, but these are just a few of the examples that we have here. So these are just examples. So internet threats and security, network security threats and passive attacks. So attacks can either be active or passive, right? So when we say an attack is active, that means you are interacting with the network directly, right? Interacting or serving. I mean, we talked about different types of masquerading attack. We talked about IP spoofing. I mean, we talked about I mean the spoofing attacks. Because basically you're hiding your true identity, so you're pretending to be someone else when carrying out those attacks. Now, so your attack can either be passive or active. So for passive attacks, you are not interfering, you are just listening on traffic, you are not changing anything. But when it becomes an active attack, you are just you can manipulate some of the information that is being passed across. Okay, so under your passive attacks, basically you gather network information, which would include things like your network analysis, eavesdropping, traffic analysis. You are not making any changes. All right, but for your active attack, changes are made. Now, the internet poses significant security problems for enterprises seeking to protect their information assets, such as hackers, virus writers, who want to just invade others' privacy and attempt to crack into databases of sensitive information as they travel across the internet routes. Now, our IP address, or the IP address, is designed to address and route data packets across a network, but does not guarantee or provide evidence of the delivery of the message. Other protocols correct some of these drawbacks. So basically what we're looking at here is this. We've talked about the internet. It poses a lot of risk because it's out there. There are no more controls. Now, the other thing we just mentioned here are IP addresses. Your IP, I mean, everybody who is connected to this call right now most likely has an IP address assigned to them. That IP address can be used to tell where you are in the world, because as of today, IP addresses are broken down into regions. So with my IP address, you'll be able to know where I am actually located. With your IP address, somebody will be able to say this is where you are right now. Now, it's possible to deceive the system by changing your IP address location using VPN. I think that last week when we discussed, I mentioned that during my master's program with ISACA Council, one of the assignments I got required me to do a review of a particular website, which is not, which was blocking my IP address because I was in Nigeria. And all I needed to do was to use a VPN, and then I was able to access that IP address. And that just tells us that your IP can be used as a means of identification. Now, identification in what sense? Identification of where you are. So in the early class when we started, I mentioned about identification, authentication, and authorization, and I said when it comes to identification and authentication, you authenticate using different means. What you know, like your password, your PIN, what you have, like your token, all right, or your physical token or your smart card, who you are, your biometrics, iris scan, palm scan, thumb scan, whatever scan you want to call it, all right, or even your gait, how you walk, how you talk. I mean, those are also part of biometrics, right? Then the fourth one is where you are. So you get authenticated by your location also. So the fact that I couldn't log into the site that my school wanted me to review was because my site, which was Nigeria, most likely was blacklisted. All right, I'm not permitted to access those resources, but the bypass was to use a VPN. So what it also informs us is this: for every control you have, there is likely one or more ways to bypass it. And that's the work of ethical hackers, trying to find out weaknesses within the system, how it can be exploited, and then try to fix it. So it's always more like a catch-up game. You know what I mean? One person is doing something, the bad guys are doing something, the good guys are trying to catch up with them, trying to fix it and make things better. All right. Now, network security threats involve probing network information. It can be passive attacks that lead to active attacks or intrusions into the enterprise network. So we've also talked about the difference between passive and active. We said passive, you're really not doing anything, you're just listening. And in Yoruba, they will call it bebono. You just listen. I mean, you just see people gisting and you have somebody that's just listening as if they are not there. And they can repeat everything you said verbatim, all right? And that's how passive attack works. The attacker, you would not know he's there, all right? He's just there listening. He's not tampering with anything, so nothing is going wrong. But from the information he would have gathered during those passive attacks, he can now actively engage the network. Then you know something is wrong. But by the time you know something is wrong, it's already late because the attacker has already gotten sufficient information about your network, its layout, and all the critical jewels and assets you have that it can actually compromise. Okay, so here types of active attacks. Basically what we're looking at here now would split some of the attacks that we've looked at as of last week into either active attacks, targeted attacks. Then we look at an example of OWASP's top 10 types of attacks. So active attacks, we talk about brute force attack. So a brute force attack is an attack that requires an attacker to continuously bombard your system until it breaks through. All right, and a brute force attack most times are attack against your credentials. So you have your username and password. Now, if you don't have the control and a control like locking of an account after 3 failed logon attempts, that is where your brute force attack works best. And I know there is a particular question you would likely come across in your practice session where it says that which of these accounts would be best used, will be the best target when carrying out a brute force attack. And I think for that particular answer, the answer was the local admin account. And that's because the system does not lock a local admin account even when the password fails, and because you don't want to lock out the system totally. So that's a control, that's something that was built into the system. And that's why most times in our organization we say we need to lock both the guest and the local account. Let everybody log in with the domain credentials. And that's because an attacker can take over the local account and then he traverses across our network through that method. So your brute force attack is majorly an attack on your password credentials. I mean, the attacker keeps spraying different types of password until the right one is used. And that's also the reason why we are always advised against using common words, dictionary words for passwords. Now, another active attack is masquerading, pretending to be who you are not. All right. So when we talk about masquerading, you have different types of masquerading. You have IP spoofing is a form of masquerading. MAC address spoofing is a form of masquerading. All right. So in masquerading, you are interacting with the network. You are not passive. You are obviously available or actively playing on the target system, and a well-informed and educated, what do you call it now, IT admin, information security administrator would know. All right. Then packet replay is a type of attack where you have a man in the middle, and the attacker is in the middle. He gets the message from the sender. The sender thinks he's speaking with the receiver. The receiver thinks he's speaking with the sender, but they are both speaking with a middleman. All right. So the sender sends a message. Now, one thing I need to also point out, when we talk about packets, is the message at the layer 3 where your IP address is being used in the communication stack. All right. So when you hear packet, just know that it's the message at the layer 3. So for that, the sender sends that packet, the attacker receives it, reads through it, and passes it on. All right. Or reads through it, modifies it, and passes it on. So that's packet replay. Now, phishing attack, we mentioned, it's basically hacking the human mind, exploiting the human vulnerability of trust, pretend to be a person of authority and the likes, and then gain trust, and then you get them to release their credentials, or you'll be able to access things that you should normally not access. Next, we have message modification. So an attacker can actually receive a message, modify it, and send it to the intended recipient. All right. Unauthorized access through the internet possible. All right. So, I mean, when an attacker tries to break into your network through the internet, they are actively interacting with your network. All right. So that's a form of active attack. We talked about denial of service, and where you have multiple attacks coming to just one target. All right. Multiple requests coming to just one target. And we said it becomes distributed denial of service when the source of attacks is coming not just from one system, but multiple other systems just to one system. Now, when you talk about denial of service attack, it's always an attack on the availability of your services at first. You want to bring down that service so that you get overwhelmed and you cannot meet your legitimate requests. All right. Remote access penetration attacks is basically an attack that is done from outside of your organization. I mean, the attacker is trying to take over your system, basically they would exploit the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities that they've identified, especially during those passive points in time, the passive attacks that happen even without your knowledge. Email bombing and spamming, it's a type of attack where the attacker just keeps sending mails to either a distribution list or a set of people so that at least one person will click on the link that will take them to where they will divulge their credentials. All right, then email spoofing is a different type of attack, but it's also an attack on the identity. So it's also a type of masquerading attacks. Anytime you see spoofing, just think of it as a masquerade, wearing a mask, trying to pretend to be someone else. When we talked about IP spoofing, you're using your IP, you're using someone else's IP as your own, pretending to be someone else. When you say MAC address spoofing, you're using someone else's MAC address to pretending to be your own. And MAC address is actually a layer 2 address. So when we talk about email spoofing, you're pretending to be sending an email from someone else that you are not. So one of the frauds that we've seen, or at least I have seen, was a situation where an account officer got an instruction to move funds on behalf of a corporate organization. This is their way of doing business. So part of the services that were rendered in the bank was email transactions. So you can issue an instruction to your bank via email and they would transfer the funds on your behalf. All right. But it has to come, your letterhead come from an official email. So what happened was the attacker created another email that looked like the customer's own. Let's assume the customer is abccompanies.com. All right, and the email will come from Shade at abccompanies.com. Now, the attacker created another email, Shade at abccompanies.con, C-O-R-N. Now, R-N, C-O-R-N and C-O-M, they look alike if you don't look at it very well, especially when it's an email. All right, and that was the kind of attack that we saw. But good enough, we also have a process whereby when the account officer receives such instructions, they are supposed to do an out-of-band verification. That means you do something outside the normal means of communication. So if the request came via email, you're supposed to either put a call through to a primary contact within the organization, and the call should be a recorded call. All right, so that if anything goes wrong, you have your evidence to say that we called an official and they said it's okay to go ahead. Okay, so these are just types of active attacks, targeted attacks on a specific enterprise. We talked about whaling that last week. We talked about spear phishing. And we said whaling is more or less more targeted than spear phishing. Spear phishing is more targeted than the, what do you call it now, email bombing and spamming to everybody. But when it comes to spear phishing, you're targeting a set of people, all right? And then your messages or the email messages, or in some cases SMSs, are targeted towards those people. You've done your research there as an attacker. But when it comes to whaling, it's targeting just one person. And I mentioned that there was this business email compromise attack in the US, one of their banks, by one Nigerian, is it Obi-Wan or something, that year. It was a big deal. But the good thing is, I think the executive or the CFO who compromised lost his job, but it was a good lesson to learn. Anywhere that story is being told, executives are made to know that they could be held accountable for their actions, even if it's done under duress or they were under attack. All right. So targeted attacks are on specific enterprise to compromise its security, steal its data. It also consists of multi-level attacks initiated through malware. All right, so it could be that just through one person they get a ransomware, which is a type of malware, into the organization network, and that can spread around, and then they hold the whole company into ransom. Now, your targeted attacks could also continue for a sustained period of time and are generally not exposed until data is compromised. A lot of times when a targeted attack is happening, it's difficult to know because the attacker is most likely a very skilled person. We talked about different types of attackers script kiddies, white hat, black hat, gray hat. All right. But the truth is, for a targeted attack, it's mostly skilled guys that are behind it. And then by the time you know what's happening, it's most likely at a point where your data is already compromised and they're asking for ransom, that you actually are aware that something actually happened. Now, your OWASP top 10 attacks, basically you have like resources for common vulnerabilities for various systems, including web applications, APIs, and mobile devices. How many of us have actually viewed seen OWASP top 10? Hello?
I haven't.
You have?
No.
No, okay. All right, thank you. Any other person who has or hasn't? All right, so one of the things you should do is try to check it out. We have OWASP top 10 for web applications, for APIs, for mobile devices. Trying to see if I can just get them open. Then I'll share the screen just for you to see. I'll not be going through each of the controls or the types of attacks there. That's our homework. For the exam, nobody's going to ask you which one is the top 10 because it changes every year. But there are some risk that has been there consistently. All right, just give me a minute. I need to share what I have here. So you see top 10 web application security risk. You have in 2017, article injection was number 1. It became number 3 in 2021. Broken authentication, you have it moved to number 7. Sensitive data exposure moved to number 2. Cryptographic failures, because cryptographic data is actually sensitive information. So basically, you have it move from place to place. Let's see 2025 data. Okay, I'm coming.
Sorry, please, you are not sharing your screen where you were seeing the top.
Sorry. Thanks for letting me know.
No problem.
I thought I'd share it. Can you see it now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first page I was before that I was showing the map for 2017, 2021. So these are the top 10 in 2017. Then you have the top 10 in 2021. All right. Broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design was a new one. It wasn't in 2017. Security configuration is not so new because your XML external entity is a form of security misconfiguration issue. Vulnerability and outdated components, you have it here in 2017 as number 9, but moved up to number 6 in 2021. Identification and authentication failures. All right, broken authentication, it was number 2 in 2017, moved to number 7 in 2021. So that means I think people are building more secure solutions in some sort, or at least patching whatever is still out there that needs to be patched. Your software and data integrity failures was new. It wasn't there before. You have, but it had a dotted line to this insecure serialization because it's used for software development. All right, if you don't have secure deserialization, that's a vulnerability. So then server-side request forgery, SSRF, was new in 2021. It wasn't there in 2017. So there's been a lot of stuff. Let me see. Is there only one I can see for 2025? I don't know. But just take your time and read through these things. It's helpful. It helps you understand, okay, like I mean, if you're an auditor reviewing a web application, if I were to be in your position, right, one of the first things I want to look at first is any of our application vulnerable to any of the top 10 risks? Because the truth is, there is no application that is not vulnerable, but you do not want a vulnerability that can be easily exploited. And that's where these top 10 risks can actually help you out. So spend time and play around there. I hope you'll be able to get something to work with. Any question? So still on the OWASP top 10 attacks, we say it describes the 10 most common and impactful vulnerabilities that appear in production web applications. So if you are doing a review of your organization's web applications, this would be a standard that would be good to look at to guide you to check, okay, do we have any cryptographic exchange? All right, are we encrypting some of our communication? If we are, is it subject to cryptographic failure? So you carry out a test specifically to check for that vulnerability. The number one is broken access control. Is it, I know last week we talked about time of use, time of check, time of use, TOC, TOU. All right, there is a broken access control, whereby before the server is able to validate your authentication credentials, like your password, you now have access to the solution. That means authentication did not happen before you were now authorized to do things on the system. That is broken access control. You want to check if it's possible on your applications. All right, so those are just I think from the 2021, it moved from the 5th position, it was number 5 before, to number 1. That's because 94% of applications tested some form of, tested had some form of broken access control. All right, so you want to ensure that those common vulnerabilities that has huge impact are not available on your systems. You still have some vulnerabilities that by your risk management strategy you might choose to accept because fixing it will be too expensive and impractical. All right, so that's that. Any question? Okay. So Chidi, you're good, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. So just take time out and look at those things and see what you can get from it. It actually makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of information there that if you take your time, you will find something good and you can work with, at least on the job.
All right.
And I know that, okay, let's say something.
No.
Okay. I know that I mentioned to us that you have access to a lot of resources on ISACA sites, work papers on carrying out assessments on web applications, SAP servers, and the likes. Please, if you've already registered with ISACA, use the opportunity to download all those resources. They are a lifesaver. The truth is, you don't have to know everything, at least at the same time. For me, I gather data and materials, even the ones I don't need now, so that when I need them, I can call upon them easily. All right, so please, I would recommend the same thing for us. Okay, I recommend the same thing. So let's look at what we have here. We have different types of malware. Okay, we have different types of malware. We have ransomware, worms, viruses, adware, spyware, rootkits. Now, a variety of malicious computer programs that send out requests to the operating system of the host system under attack to append the malware to other programs. Malware attacks 4 parts of our computer. One is the executable files. The other one is our directory systems. The other one is the data files. And the last is the boot and system areas. When you hit the boot and system area, then your system will no longer be able to even come up. All right, so it's important we know the difference. It's important we know the difference. So let's look at this now. When we talk about viruses, they are basically a type of malware. They append themselves to other programs. We actually talked about this last week. They append themselves to other programs. So they attack the executable file, executable program files, and they are self-propagating. They often spread through specific event triggers. Before a specific event triggers them. So once you have a virus, it affects your program. Some of your programs no longer work because it infects them. Now, worm, on the other hand, is a destructive program that destroys data and uses up resources. So your worms affect your data files. So when you have worm, your system becomes so slow, and that's because the worm is propagating and using up your storage. They do not replicate by changing programs. They don't affect the executable programs. They run independently. And the bad thing about worms is that they can move across networks by exploiting the vulnerabilities you have. Okay, so it's important we know that. Now, hardware, on the other hand, all right, it's a form of malware, all right, that affects. Basically, it's used by, how do I call it now? They are unwanted software designed to show advertisement. So they don't necessarily do you harm. They just throw up things that you don't need. So, for example, most of us have hardwares on our systems, knowingly or unknowingly, mostly unknowingly. All right, when you go to sites and you give all those consents, some of them install, cookies that follows you everywhere. So have you wondered how come you went to Amazon, you checked for some things there, and in your Yahoo Mail, there's a sidebar for those of us that are not paying for the services that they do adverts. And all the sites that you've gone, either is Amazon, Shen, Temu, Jumia, and the likes, you see the advert of the specific product you checked for. All right, that's where you would find it. You see them there. So those are hardwares. Basically, they just try to advertise to you there. Now, on the other hand, spyware secretly gathers information about a user or a computer. And so if you have spyware, then that's very bad because most times you're not even aware. Your spyware, an example would be things like a keylogger or a soft keylogger that is just capturing everything you type, your username, password, account details, account transaction passwords, and all of that, and then transmits it to an attacker. All right. So this is very, very, very not good for us. It's not good to have a spyware on our system. Then rootkit, on the other hand, programs. They are basically programs that hide the presence or the presence of other malicious software. So when you have a rootkit, so the way it works, attackers use rootkits to hide what they are doing. It tries to hide the existence of a malware, the existence of a spyware. All right, it tries to hide the existence of either a malware or a spyware. So you don't want you to know that they are there in the first place. They don't want to know that they are there in the first place. So that's that about malware. I don't know if you have any questions about malware or the different types of malware or the various parts that a malware attack in the system. So what are the controls that we can put in place for malwares? For virus and worms, we can have policies and procedures. Those will be preventive. That means an example of a policy would be a policy that blocks all USB ports such that at least you won't be able to, the systems will not get infected by viruses through USB stick, even though we know we can also get it through mails and other things. But then for the mails, you could actually have some form of mail, an scanner that checks for malwares and viruses within a mail. I mean, for some of us, it happens, but you are not even aware. I mean, your organizations have invested in such already. So for virus and worms control, we could have preventive controls like your policies, procedures, people acting the same way. So for example, a procedure would be that we've told our staff that whenever you receive an attachment, never just open an attachment. Make sure that you scan the attachment before you run it. All right. Detective controls, which will likely be technical controls, will be things like your anti-malware and anti-malware software, basically to be able to detect when you're already infected. All right. But for preventive, putting your policies and proper procedures in place could actually prevent the spread of viruses and worms. Now, management procedural controls are policies and procedural controls that should be in place, and including building systems from original clean master copies, updating your malware softwares, scanning definitions, and signature frequently. And I think we solved the question whereby we said that we need to turn on auto updates, especially for anti-malware or antivirus that is signature based. All right. So that it always have the most updated signature and be able to identify and pick up the most recent types of viruses or worms that exist. Now, hardware tactics that can reduce the risk of infection include using boot malware protection. So remote booting, hardware-based password is one. Protecting removable media against theft and hazards. That's another. Then ensuring insecure protocols are blocked by firewalls. So the way it is, the expectation here is that as an IT security administrator who is in charge or responsible for the firewalls, you don't just use blanket rules. You should be able to target unsecure protocols. Because that's the easiest way to send things that are malicious, because you expect that it's just general packets that are coming in. All right. So these are ways that we could actually also reduce the risk of infections. So anti-malware software types. Anti-malware software types, you have different types. You have those that are scanners. Basically, they just look for sequences of bits that are typical of malware programs, which include malware mask or signature scanners or heuristic scanners. So these are just basically scanners. The other type is your active anti-malware software. Basically, it interprets the command line and read-only memory. Then your BIOS calls, basically looking for malware-like actions. So it's looking for, it's basically looking for things that are abnormal, things that seem to be out of place. All right, that's what it's looking for. Things that are abnormal, things that seem to be out of place. All right. So we talked about the scanner, so your malware mask or signatures, and then you also have your active monitors. That's the one we talked about that interprets the command line and reads what's in your ROM and your BIOS calls. Then you also have your integrity CRC checkers, which is your integrity cyclic redundancy check checkers, all right? Basically, these ones compute a binary number of a known malware-free program, all right? that's stored in a database. Then they detect changes by comparing subsequent calls indicating possible infections. So basically, it's looking at so when we talk about your integrity CRC checkers, it's just like a hash. You know that, okay, this is something that we always see when a particular malware program runs. Then if we see this particular call, then it's possible that could be an indication of a possible infection. Now, it's actually effective after infection has occurred and ineffective against newly infected files. So that's the drawback of your integrity CRC checkers. Then the next one is behavior blockers. Basically, it just detects potentially abnormal behaviors to detect malware at an early stage. Its target is just abnormal behavior. An example of abnormal behavior will be writing to boot sector. Recall in the previous slide, sorry, in the previous slide, in the previous slide where we talked about the 4 areas where a malware attack can take place, said the executable files, data files, file directory system, and your boot system areas. So when you see that, for example, an application that has nothing to do with the operating system booting procedure is writing to the boot sector, then it could actually be a form of identification of a type of malware currently trying to make changes to your boot sector. An example will also be changing executable files. All right. If it's not its own executable file, it has no business making changes to other executable files. All right. So when you find all these abnormal behavior patterns, it could be that your system is actually currently being attacked. All right, by a malware. So then we said it can also detect malware at an early stage. That's one of the strong points. Then the fifth type of anti-malware software is immunizers. They defend against malware by appending sections of themselves to files to continually check for changes. So basically, your immunizers would, just like immunization, when you give birth to a child, it goes for all these vaccines. Those vaccines on their own are actually a type of virus, all right, introduced into the system of the child to make it immune to the actual virus itself. So it's the same thing that is happening here. The immunizers append themselves to files so that they can easily know if the files have been affected or has been changed. So using immunizers will be best, especially when the system is not infected at the early stage of setup of the system. Because after that, the immunizers can actually monitor and see changes that are happening to any of the files on the system. But if it's to an infected system, it's actually already late for that. I don't know, do you have questions on this before we move ahead?
Please, can you move the icon so we are able to see the names of the different types of software? The first one, I really can't see what is this.
Can I call it out for you? Because what I'm using now, it's not a slide, but it's a document that we have. But that's why I actually try to call it out. So I will just quickly take my time and call it out again so you would have that. The first one is scanners. All right. And I'm sure if you check.
Oh, scanners. Okay.
Also see it, yeah. Scanners. The second one is active monitors. Active monitors. The third is integrity CRC, that is integrity cyclic redundancy checkers. The integrity CRC checkers, that's the third one. The fourth one is behavior blockers. Behavior blockers. And the fifth one is immunizers. Immunizers.
Okay. Immunizers. Okay.
All right. Thanks for drawing my attention to that. I saw it, but I just need that's why I needed to read it out to us so that we were all aware. So, anti-malware software implementation strategies. How do we implement it? How do we go about implementing it? So, an important means of controlling spread of malware is to detect at its point of entry before it can cause damage, and should include scheduled malware scans, on-demand scans, and continuous scanning of user servers and workstations. Now, most of us have seen this in play, at least for my own system. When I plug in a USB, plug in an external hard drive, it automatically scans, all right, to check for viruses on those external drives, either USB stick or external hard drive, right? And then also periodically, it also scans my system, and also even scans to the appended storage that I have, like my Google Drive, the cache of the Google Drive on my system. And in my Google Drive, I have some things that are deemed to be malicious and could harm systems. So the local cache of it always tells me that I saw this and saw that, but because I know what it's seeing, I'm not worried. If it's something I don't know, then I'll be worried. All right. So malware scanning software is a part of the firewall and is referred to as malware wall that work at 3 levels. So you can actually have this. So you have the malware walls. It has SMTP protection, HTTP protection, and FTP protection. Now, SMTP protection is to scan inbound and outbound traffic for malware. HTTP protection is to prevent malware-infected files from being downloaded. Recall in the previous slide we talked about. Okay, just give me a minute. Let me go back there so that just read it out for us. Under these hardware tactics and that can use to reduce infection, risk of infection, we talked about ensuring insecure protocols are blocked by the firewall. An example of that insecure protocol would be this: your HTTP, your FTP. They could be insecure, and that's why, as part of your firewall, some firewalls have this malware scanning software, which is now called the malware walls. All right, and basically it's protecting against your SMTP, HTTP, and FTP. So for the HTTP, is your hypertext terminal protocol. Your FTP is your file transfer protocol, and your SMTP, I think, is simple mail transfer protocol. All right. So basically, at that malware wall or the firewall with the malware service or application, it scans both your inbound and outbound mail traffic. The HTTP, it also scans for the files being downloaded. So, like when you download a file in your office, for those that have this protection, it scans the attachment that you are downloading to be sure that it's not infected. So recall I said that one of the ways we can protect against malware is, okay, you handle it at the policy side, block USB. That's one way of entry into the system. Another way is from over the internet, downloading files, all right, or through emails. So your SMTP scanning protects against the email side, your HTTP protection against download of files, your FTP protection also against download of files, because it's a different protocol for downloading files, which is that file transfer protocol. So it's help prevent infected files also from being downloaded. Now, for malware scanners to be acceptable and viable, their feature sets should actually include one, reliability and quality in detection of malware. If the malware keeps throwing false positive, I mean, it becomes ineffective. All right. So we want to be able to rely on it. We want to be able to vouch for the quality of the detection it does. Then resident memory, which is a continuous checking facility, has to also be there. Because the truth is, some malwares, recall we use malware as a generic term because we know that there are different types of softwares that are classified as malwares, your virus, worm, and the likes, right? So just have that back of your mind. So we want a solution that can also scan the memory because the data in the memory are not long-term data. They are not saved on hard drives. When you restart the system, it's gone. Some malwares reside in the memory and they steal sensitive information there. So you want to see a malware scanner that will be a viable one, should be one that can also take care of data in the memory. Then also it needs to be, efficiency is one thing. Such a reasonable working speed and use of resources. There was a particular anti-malware or antivirus that was installed one time in one of the organizations where I worked. And the moment we changed to that, the systems became very slow. Very, very slow. Such that for us to use that particular anti-malware, you would need to upgrade practically everybody's laptop to a higher, to at minimum 16 gig RAM, and that was in those years. All right. So today, 16 gig seems to be a common thing. 12 gig seems to be a common thing that every other system has, but it's expensive, right? So when we are going for a malware scanner, we want something that is efficient, that doesn't consume unnecessary resources, that works fast, all right, and the utilization of resources is limited, all right. So we want an efficient malware solution. Now, that being said, any question with respect to malware before we go to ransomware? So if there are no questions. So ransomware, on the other hand, is also a type of malware, but this is a malicious software that employs some form of encryption techniques and basically to hold a victim's information or data at ransom. So we're all aware of different types of ransom attacks in the Niger Delta, the North, where people are kidnapped and they're asking that if you want to see your family member back alive, then you need to pay a certain amount of money. So it's the same thing that is happening, but to your data and to your systems. So it basically works by accessing a target system and encrypting critical data so that the users cannot access it. It's designed to spread across the network or a network and target the database and file servers to quickly paralyze the entire enterprise. So the first thing is infection. After it infects, it encrypts. Then after it encrypts, then a demand comes. All right. So the infection can come through all the other ways we've talked about. HTTP download, FTP download, even email downloads from inbound mails and all of that. All right. You can get infected just the same way you get infected with viruses, worms, and other things. But once you are infected, it could be by just clicking a link, which will lead you to the ransomware getting downloaded and executed on the computer. That's why, as much as lie within your power, don't click on anything that you find in a mail or from an unsolicited mail. While it's in your mail, if you don't click on it, you're still safe. The moment you click on it, that click action will both download it and install. Now, once in the system, it encrypts files using asymmetric encryption. We'll talk more about that when we talk about our cryptographic system. We have both symmetric and asymmetric. Symmetric uses just one key. So you can see that one key as maybe a password, but long or something, all right? Asymmetric uses two keys, which will be both your private key and your public key, all right? So most times the encryption algorithm encryption method that's in use is the asymmetric encryption. all right, because it's effective replacing the original file, the encrypted version. Now, the attacker withholds the private key from the victim. So, I mean, when you want to decrypt that particular one, you would need to decrypt it with the private key. Now, it's impossible for the victim to decrypt the file without the private key. Then the step 3 would be the ransom demand. The attacker now asks a ransom by changing the background to a note demanding for a cryptocurrency, and it will give you a crypto wallet that you need to send the money to. Now, if the ransom is paid, the ransomware operator will then provide you with a private key to restore access to the files. Now, while it's always encouraged that we do not negotiate with attackers, a lot of companies actually do this. They pay off. Now, paying off doesn't guarantee anything. All right. Paying off doesn't mean they will give you the key. So it's a gamble. So you might get the key. If you get the key, good. If you don't get the key, then it's gone. Now, the other thing is, even when you get the key, there are no guarantees that the data has not been copied. Remember, today's gold is your data. Today, everybody is doing data analytics. It's not by accident. It's because that's where, the future is. People will get to know what your customer needs tomorrow from their activities today, and those data are being kept by your several systems. So you want to be sure that even after you've done all this, and even if you pay for the ransom, one thing you should have at the back of your mind is there are no guarantees that your data was not compromised. Your data was not compromised. No guarantee about that. So we need to have that at the back of our minds. Mitigating active ransomware infections, number one is to quarantine the machine in order to contain the spread. There's always that body of knowledge that says just unplug or just switch off the system. In this particular scenario, please do not turn it off. We want to create a backup of the infected system after it's been quarantined. Now, the other thing is, in one of the banks I've worked before, we've actually witnessed this ransomware attack. But the good thing is, the system that was attacked, or the point of entry, was not a critical server. It wasn't a server. It was a workstation. All right. It was just going to be a matter of time that malware could have spread across our network, but it was able to be contained. And then one of the beauty about, I think the point of entry was via mail. So the IT administrators could actually pinpoint all systems that got the same kind of mail with the attachment, so it could be quarantined. All right. So that's how we were able to at least protect our organization and prevent a further spread of that particular attack. Okay. So it's always advised that you create a backup, check for decryptors if possible, locate patient zero. That's the triaging, knowing where is the first source, who was the first victim. All right. In some cases, when people receive one mail, especially those of us that like cartoons, funny videos, I don't forward those things. You see some message, say, if you want to go to heaven, click on this message or send it to 50 people. All right. All these spiritual blackmail does not work for me. Because that is how attackers spread their evilness on our systems. All right. So we need to know that patient zero. Because in some cases, you will see that the messages are all these, what I put it on, like today, this period, you know that the war in Ukraine, the war between Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Israel is a big topic. And so you can see the attacker can come from a sensational direction, sensation message or video or document that tells you what you need to know about Israel-Gaza war. So if you are someone who is passionate about Israel-Gaza war, you forward it to all your other passionate members that love the story about the wars around the world and want to be updated. and that way they are spreading the evil news of ransomware. All right, so that's why it's important to locate the patient zero. Where was the source of, who was the first victim, and if that victim is someone who is influential, we will send it to his own network, and that way it will spread like wildfire across our organization. So we need to locate patient zero and then try to wipe and restore the system. Then we have fiduciary responsibilities to report to authorities. Now, Nigeria, I don't think we are matured enough. I'm not sure if we have an organization to report to. But in the likes of the US and Europe, you can't have a malware, a ransomware attack and keep quiet. Because even if you get your data back or restore your system back from a previous backup that was not infected, and you're able to, recapture the data difference, there is no guarantee that your customer data was not violated. And because those part of the world are peculiar, or sensitive to data privacy, then it becomes a big deal. So reporting to authorities now happens to be the next step there. Okay. Any questions before we move ahead? So I guess you guys don't have any question then. So we look at security testing tools and techniques. Now, the objective of any security testing is one, to identification of our assets and what are the threats and vulnerabilities those assets are exposed to, what the risk exposure we have for those assets, then performance of remediation, then evaluation of the strength of the assets and controls vis-a-vis the remedial actions that has already been taken. Then we look at adherence to security principles. So vulnerability assessment normally would involve identifying vulnerabilities in target systems. And when we talk about vulnerabilities, it basically means weakness, the weakness of a particular system, right? They are typically carried out by trustworthy information security experts, whose goals include identifying and evaluating and prioritizing vulnerabilities. Recall when we talked about the OWASP top 10, I told you that if I were to be in your position carrying out an IS audit, I will prioritize the weaknesses that I see as the top 10 risk or weaknesses or vulnerabilities for a web application or for an API, or depending on the top 10 I'm looking at, maybe mobile application, right? And that's because those top 10 are the most common and the most dangerous. Then I can look at others. So whoever is carrying out a vulnerability assessment needs to be able to identify all possible vulnerabilities that are on our assets. But the truth is we can't remediate all vulnerabilities. So there has to be some form of ranking, and that's where the prioritization of vulnerabilities comes in. We need to be able to prioritize our vulnerabilities. The other goal is learning about the current vulnerabilities, deciding on what controls to implement to address the vulnerabilities. Now, there's always this balance between risk and reward. You can't fix all vulnerabilities. It's not possible. That's why I said there are no systems without vulnerabilities. All right. But the goal is to make sure that our system is secured enough to the point whereby existing weaknesses cannot be exploited, right? Because we have other compensating measures and other compensating controls in place. So we need to decide on what controls we need to put in place, and that will be also dependent on how we have prioritized our vulnerabilities. We need to be able to evaluate our organization's security posture. Where are we? What do we have? What don't we have? A lot of people don't even know what controls they have in the organization. In my previous world, one of my responsibility is to be able to do an investigation to see if our controls were breached or if we did not have controls in the first place to address the risk that was exploited or that crystallized. Okay, so there's no way I would have been able to carry out that function if I'm not aware of the existing controls in our applications and in our systems. Now, assessing the reaction of the information security environment to vulnerabilities, it's another. You want to know what's the impact. Is it going to be something catastrophic? Is it something that has no impact really? It's just a weakness that if exploited could be used as a foothold for a bigger risk. All right, so we need to do some form of assessment of the risk we have to our information security environment or the vulnerabilities to our information security environment. Then identify ways an attacker can exploit these vulnerabilities. How can they exploit it? What can they do? What's the attack tree? What are the attack paths? What are the possible ways that this vulnerability can be exploited? I mean, it's something that there are common knowledge out there on the web everywhere. So please just try to check out things, especially if you're, I mean, I think Lamide and I don't know, someone else, some of you guys that work together, I'm coming. I don't know if Ebenezer works with Lamide. Yeah, I think Tosin also, I'm not sure it's Tosin. I know like three of you guys. What do you say?
I think it's Ebenezer.
Yeah, Ebenezer, thank you. Yourself, Ebenezer, and one other person. I think you guys work currently with, serving as control officers to some extent. All right. So one of the things I would suggest is for whatever system you are responsible for, it will be good for you to know what the weaknesses are. How can they be exploited? If they are exploited, what would the impact be? And then what are the possible controls we can have in place? Now, the truth is, not all controls, management will not buy into every control you set, because if you put all the controls you need on an application, that application becomes useless, all right, because there's always a trade-off between security and functionality. So the dexterity you require is to be able to find a good balance between both functionality and then security. And that's why you need to be able to prioritize your vulnerability. So that's one thing I think would be a good deal for yourself and your team. Now, any question before we look at penetration testing, test method and scope? If there are no questions, recall when we commenced the class, I said ISACA expects us to be a jack of all trade and master of one or more. So in the exam, nobody's going to ask you to do actual penetration testing. But I think this was recently introduced to the manual for us to know more about it, because it's something that is becoming a more frequent topic people need to know. All right. So as an IS auditor, you need to be aware of what penetration testing methods are, the scope, what it can contain. Yeah. So we'll quickly look at it, and then if there are questions that you see, I believe you'll be able to deal with them as they come up. Now, procedures in which an IS auditor uses the same techniques as a hacker. You have one which is the manual penetration testing. It's conducted by humans who are experts in information security. Involves application of tools that must be run manually. So you have different steps you take. Number one, most times, is information gathering. Then you run some tools to gather more information about your network, what's involved, and then you try to simulate some attacks using several other tools that are there in the market. A lot of them are free, so you don't really need to pay for anything. Now, the other approach could be the automated penetration testing, which basically involves the use of some applications of tools that requires little or no human interaction. to run a fixed set of predefined tests and associated attack vectors. All right, so it's either you're targeting a wireless attack vector or a Bluetooth attack vector, and the automated penetration testing targets a specific scope. All right, and so it's predefined, and then you just click run, and it runs just for that. But in manual, the penetration tester has the discretion to do what he or she wants using different tools of any kind, to also test specific goals. And the goals that we're looking at here are what would have been defined in the scope of an engagement. All right, so when you engage a penetration tester, there's always a scope of work, what should be done, what IP range. I'm sure you guys would have likely heard about there's this service whereby you pay pen testers to test your system. It's called bug bounty. You put, there's always a scope of, okay, these are the IP addresses that you should test. If you find any weakness in my system, I'll pay you $100, I'll pay you $500 and the like. So for some people, bug bounty is the way they earn their living, all right? And all they specialize is either web application testing, trying to find out what is wrong, and then they get paid for it. And the company gets to fix whatever they find. Facebook is also on that bug bounty program. I think one of the bug bounty platforms is, I think, Integrify or something. There are different ones out there. So if you're interested in bug bounty, just search, you'll find. All right. The scope can vary, but it should clearly address one, the precise IP addresses or ranges to be tested. So in most bug bounty program, you have specific IP address ranges. Let me see if I can lay my hands on. Yeah. So the one I mentioned is integrity bounty, bug bounty. Let me see if I'm able to open it. I think I might have signed in at some point, but I don't know. So this is one platform, integrity. So these are some of the guys that have put up a request for their system to be tested. What is a big company, very global sign, AR Bonia VDP program. All right, this one, there are some that says responsible disclosure. That means they say feel free to join our vulnerability disclosure program, but we are not paying anything. All right, so you can play around, but there's always let me look for there's always a scope of work. So for this world, it's leisure, hospitality. So they sell food, clothing, electronic, blah blah blah. We have more than this, so you can read more about them. So the bounty is here. If you find a low risk, and this rating you're seeing is your CVV. It's a global rating of vulnerabilities. There has a CVV calculator online. So if the risk is, or the vulnerability you find is between 0.1 to 3.9, which is a low rated one, you get 150 euros. Tier 1, tier 2 is 100. If it's medium, 750 or 500. If it's high, 1,005. If it's a critical risk that is from 9.0 to 9.4, then you get 3,000 euros. And if it's a 9.5 to 10, that is a risk that can be exploited and have a huge impact, then you get like 3,500 euros. All right. But now, here is the scope. You have accounts you don't own. Please don't use or interact with accounts or data you don't own, including but limited to restaurants, blah, blah, blah. Please use only your own accounts and data for testing purpose. If you need any sort of user data, please do it only using specific customer test account. So they've given a sample customer account and then a venue test account they give you. Then if you need to test any sort of venue related functionality, please do it only against the test venue. So here are the scope, because if not, people would attack your real site and most likely bring it down. So by participating in this program, you agree to respect the community code of practice, the terms and conditions, scope of the program. Do not discuss or disclose vulnerability information without prior consent, including proof of concept on YouTube and other platforms. So most times when you see on YouTube someone is doing proof of concept of a vulnerability that is a product of this bug bounty program, you need to let the company know so that they would have fixed the vulnerability before you publish any video content or research paper. That way they are no more exposed. All right. And so they give you times where, if the vulnerability is exceptional, they would validate within 3 days, between 3 days, critical 3 days, high 5 working days, medium 15 working days, and if it's low, 15 working days. Then these are the URL that in play, authentication.wealth.com. So you feel free to work with it. We have corporate.wealth.com, keywords admin used by this. Then it just gives you a lot of information, things you should do. Then you also have the iOS. All right, this is on the application side, and you can see this is the tier 2. Now, and if you notice in their payment structure, they also broke it down to tier 1, tier 2. So tier 1 is most likely the web application, the tier 2 is the mobile application. So what you'll be doing here is basically mobile application testing and what do you call it now? Mobile application testing and web application testing. So you also see, because this is like your scope platform, they've given you that you can attack the iOS, you can attack the Android, com.world, Korea app, com.world, Android. Then out of scope, they said, please do not touch the blog.world.com. It's out of scope. It's used by world employees. Do not touch get tests. Is out of scope. No security issues affecting this. Links.world.com out of scope. So all of these ones that are out of scope, then you are not permitted to touch it by virtue of the contract. Okay. In scope, our worst case scenario is that mass disclosure of customer, courier, or merchant data. So they want you to test to see the worst case scenario. Is it possible to steal or download customer information, their courier information, merchant information? All right, these are privacy concerns and they take it very serious. All right, so look at the out of scope. Testing, payment processor is out of scope. Spamming, social engineering, physical intrusion is out of scope. So they give you all the list of things that are out of scope. All right. So what I'm just trying to point out here is when doing a penetration testing, the instructions has to be clear. What are we covering? What is not covered? Because if not, the penetration tester will go beyond the scope of the engagement and could also cause damage. All right. So let me go back to my normal slides. Any question on this stuff I showed? So talking about the scope, we're saying that precise IP ranges has to be stated. In this case of the one we looked at, is the specific web URL or Android or iOS URL was stated clearly. The restricted hosts or the hosts that are out of scope were clearly stated. In some cases, they tell you the type of testing. I mean, even in this case, they told us acceptable testing techniques because they stated the ones that they don't want. They don't want you calling their customer. They don't want spamming. They don't want you to try to break into their physical environment. Physical intrusion is out of scope. distributed denial of service is out of scope even for these particular works that we look at. Okay, so when you're looking at the scope of penetration testing, you need to tell exactly what you want and what you don't want. Management acceptance of proposed methodology, timing of simulation when it should be done, IP addresses of the source of the attack of simulation. We need to know where it's coming from. In the case of these words that we look at, they actually gave us the user ID that we can use and the VEN ID that we can also use. All right. So when they see that user ID, they know that this is a user ID from our bug bounty program, and somebody must be trying something else. Point of contact for both the tester and administrator needs to be mentioned. Handling of information collected by the penetration tester needs to be mentioned. It will be good to sign or require to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that the penetration tester cannot share the information that are sensitive, customer information, all of that they find during their penetration testing activities. Warning notifications from penetration testers before simulation begin to avoid false alarms to enforcement bodies. That will be good to have. That means when you're carrying out the penetration testing, at the point of commencement, it will be good to let them know that you are carrying out a test, so that even if their IPS is throwing flags, they know that, okay, somebody is carrying out a penetration testing, and that will even be a sign that, yes, our system is working, it's able to identify, or maybe it's not working. I mean, they've already bypassed us and the firewall didn't even throw any alert, the IDS did not throw any alert and all of that. So that's that. Your penetration testing phases will normally go from the point of planning, which would involve all those scope definitions, agreements, and all of that, to discovery, where you start the process. You do reconnaissance, find out what you can find out within the scope of the penetration testing itself, then try to exploit the weaknesses on the systems you've been able to discover, carry out an attack, and all of that comes into your reporting. And then even as you carry out the attack, you go back again and try a rediscovery. So it's a circular process. All right. For the phase that is shown here in ISACA, it shows like this. I mean, under CH is also like a 5-step stage where it's circular and it keeps going in circle until you finally get all you need to generate your report. You have different types of pen tests. You have the external penetration testing, the attacker attacks and controls circumvention attempts on the target network perimeter, but it comes from the outside. On the other hand, the internal testing, the attacks on the target is from within its own perimeter. All right, and these are also what you might call like your white box testing. Your external testing will be like a black box. You're starting from outside you as though you know nothing about the internal. Then you have your blind testing. This is where your penetration tester is provided with limited or no knowledge, all right, of the target information. It's also a type of black because you don't know anything. You're just starting from outside. I mean, you have no knowledge. On the other hand, double blind testing is an extension of blind testing because in this case, the administrator and the security staff at the target are also not aware of the test. All right, so it's possible to have a penetration testing where the administrators are not aware, because when they are aware, they try to tighten up everything. Okay, we know that they are going to attack us today. But the truth is, in a real scenario, you really don't know when the attacker will attack. You just wake up and find out that you're under attack. All right. So a double blind testing is a scenario where both the attacker and the attacked, or the defenders, which will be the IT security staff and administrators, are not aware that the penetration testing is about to happen. So it's to test if what they've designed or architected into your organizational security is actually working as it should. All right. So evaluate incident handling and response capabilities of the target. All right. Then you have also targeted testing. So attacks on the target, while both the target's IT team and penetration testers are aware of the testing activity. So this is more like the opposite of your double blind testing. So in this case, both the tester and the target IT team are aware, all right, at the same time. So some of the risks associated with penetration testing, I mean, everything in life has a risk and reward, right? So things will, for every action, there is a possibility of things going right or going wrong. So for the penetration testing risk, there is a possibility of failure to discover all vulnerabilities, including significant vulnerabilities. So that needs to be clear. The fact that you're doing a penetration testing activity does not mean that your pen tester will find everything. You're as good as your pen tester, all right? Because I mean, the dexterity of and the professionalism that is being used to carry out a penetration test depends on how much experience that the pen tester has. All right, someone who is fresh, just finished certification, does not have other experience, maybe it's just the first pen test, independent pen test is doing in the real world, would likely not find as much vulnerabilities like someone who has been carrying out corporate pen tests for the past 5 or 7 years. All right, experience level matters. Another risk associated with penetration testing is miscommunication that results in the test objectives not being met. All right, so if there is miscommunication, it's possible that the results that we stated in the objective will not be met. Another risk is inadvertent triggering escalation procedures. When we do the double-blind test, type of penetration testing, where the administrators don't know, all right, that the penetration testing is happening, you find out that they will kickstart an incident response, crisis response procedure, or escalate to high levels of what is happening, not knowing that it was actually a test. All right, so that is possible. All right, then disclosing sensitive information, heightening the target's exposure level. So when you're carrying out a pen test, there's a possible of either intentional or accidental disclosure of sensitive information. Then also, when you carry out pen testing, you know that we said it utilizes, we most times utilize tools. All right, we depend on a lot of tools, and the effectiveness of those tools depends on the experience and of the pen tester. So there is a risk that we could actually cause damage to information assets or misuse of information by pen testers who are not subject to proper background checks and qualification checks. So someone who is just starting out, doesn't know what to do, he just runs scripts and then crashes your server. And to bring up that server will cost you even much more than it costs you to engage that pen tester. All right, so these are possible risks of engaging penetration testing. And that's why when you're doing your pen testing, scoping it appropriately is very, very important to avoid these types of risks. The another risk is causing system failures if pen testing involves breaking into live production systems such as firewalls, access controls, and all of that. So things can go wrong, basically is what we're saying. So you need to count your costs before you say you want to engage a penetration tester, because things can go wrong. Anything that can go wrong may likely go wrong if not handled well. Now, any questions so far?
Yeah, so please, I have a question. Okay, so the first one, so it's just like a more or less like a straight question. So you highlighted some of the scope for pen testing. So yeah, I don't know, because usually I'm just thinking from the perspective of the exam. Most time you see when you read, you see a list of things, right? And they can list maybe characteristics of something, and they'll say 10, they'll say score whatsoever. In this particular case, which is probably the main scope that if that is not done, is as good as the fact that you have not done pen testing, right? Or some aspect of it can be missed and some aspect of it can also be covered, right? Depending on risk assessment. So I think that's my first question. What's the main one that if it is not done, at the end of the day, it's as good as you didn't do pen testing. So I'll ask the second one when you probably answer this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me start with this. So the way it is, there is no min or max.
Okay.
A pen test can be on just one URL. It can be on two. It can be on one IP address. It can be on an IP address range of maybe 100 hosts or 200 hosts. It really does not matter. The major thing is you want to do an assessment. It can be on one system, it can be on many. But the scope of your assessment is always dependent on the organization and what their risk appetite is. I give you see the bug bounty program I showed us of Worlds, where they published what they want to do. You see that they actually specified the systems that can be tested, and they mentioned what is being used for and all of that, right? And they even gave some systems that should not be tested. So the essence of giving the scope of penetration testing is for you to be able to measure if the objectives are being met. And that's why one of the risks we talked about before I asked if there were any questions was communication. If communication is not clear on what is expected, the penetration tester will be going in a different direction from what the organization actually intended. So if there's anything that we should take home from here, for me, it would be clear communication would be primary in determining the success of any penetration testing. If it's not clear on what is expected of your pen tester, most likely he or she will not be able to deliver on your expectations. All right. Then again, the experience of your penetration tester also matters because you are only as good as the person carrying out the test. If it's someone who is a veteran who has been doing it, they know the shortcuts, they know where things could go wrong. And someone who is just starting could actually cause you more damage on your system than someone who is experienced. All right. So when it comes to the scope of your pen test, it could range from one system to many. There are no hard and fast rules. They all depend on the organization. But if there is anything you need to take from here, it would be that there has to be clear communication and acceptance by both parties. In fact, one of the trainings you get as a pen tester is never carry out a penetration testing on a system without a written agreement, because what you're doing is using tools and techniques used by the bad guys. All right, which means that you can actually be sued, you can be fined, you can go to jail. So the only get out of jail card you have is your scope, or your agreement on the scope of your engagement document basically with the company. I don't know if I was able to answer your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to also add, I think this is just taking us back a bit. Sorry. I know you listed some types of active attacks, and is it active attacks? Yes. I wanted to ask, and I know maybe phishing was part of it, if I remember vividly. Is also phishing, VISHIN, also considered as an active attack, or is not an active, doesn't fall under passive attack specifically? I think that's the other thing I wanted to clarify.
No problem. So the way we define active and passive is how you interact with the target organization or the assets of the target organization. All right. Your phishing, smishing, vishing. I think vishing is the one that has to do with calls, right?
Yes, yeah,
Then the smishing is your SMS,
SMS, yeah.
is email. All right, is an attack against the human assets of that organization. So you're trying to um, carry out some form of social engineering to make them do what they would normally not do, either coerce them by threatening of an impending doom, would your account will soon be locked, you will not have access to your money. So to put some form of urgency, so in whatever shape or form, either it's smishing, phishing, or vishing, they are a type of active attack because you are interacting with an asset of the target company. So for a passive attack, we said you're not interacting, you're just listening in. I think that's where I use the Yoruba word, beborn. I mean, you can be in a restaurant now, gisting with your friend, and everything you are saying, one person is there just listening, and maybe he's not your colleague but he also works in your company. That same person can repeat everything you have said verbatim because they were listening passively. They were not interjecting in the conversation, they were not talking, but they were just listening. So the difference between passive and active is becomes active when you interact with the assets, either systems, people, their technology, it becomes active. But if you are just a passive listener, then it's passive. You are not interacting, you didn't change anything, you didn't say, please clarify. I mean, you understand. So that's the passive. So I don't know if that
Yes, that helps. Thank you. Thank you so much.
thank you very much for the question. Any other question before we proceed? Okay, so let's go back to where we were. So looking at security testing techniques, we have several of them. All right, one is a static application security test. So basically, what happens here is that it simulates a developer testing methodology, so as to be able to find vulnerabilities in the early phases of our SDLC. We've not done domain 3 yet, right? But don't worry, it will still be covered. Now in domain 3, you will talk about your software development lifecycle. That's primarily what we have in domain 3. And as I said at the beginning of the course, domain 3 has been reduced significantly by ISACA by distributing some of its topics to other domains for more details there. And then it focuses on the project side and the waterfall model of the SDLC, and then talk about alternate development methodology that we have. So when we talk about static application security testing, it basically simulates what a developer would do on different stages to see if there are vulnerabilities. Now, the dynamic application security test, basically we're simulating an attacker's testing methodology. What will an attacker do? And recall we just talked about penetration testing, which is basically doing what an attacker will do, but with the authorization of the organization. So which means that we'll be using tools, softwares to test the systems. So basically, you're using the attacker's testing methodology, finding vulnerabilities later in the SDLC, and generally fixes them in the next cycle, except for critical vulnerabilities, you might need to expedite the fixing of those patches. So when it comes to your static application security testing, it's done as you're developing the application using your developer methodologies. When it comes to your dynamic application security testing, most times after the product or the software is already in use, you're testing the software continuously using attackers testing techniques, using softwares, using tools. And when you find a vulnerability, that vulnerability will be scheduled to be released as a patch. You schedule a release of a patch sometime at the next iteration of improvement of that software. However, if the vulnerability is a critical vulnerability, it cannot wait till the next cycle. Then, depending on what the policy is in the organization, it could be that for a critical vulnerability, it has to be fixed within the next 15 or 30 days. So it depends. All right. And if you see in the integrity bug bounty platform I showed us, you saw that what has graded how they would pay for different types of risk, either low, medium, high, critical, or even exceptional risk. And then I know for sure that for the exceptional risk, they won't wait for 30 days or 60 days to fix. And if you notice for them, they said for exceptional risk and critical risk, they will validate within 3 days. So when you do your vulnerability assessment like this bug bounty and you find a vulnerability, you tell them and show them how you achieved it. And if it's an exceptional or critical risk, they would check and see revalidate in 3 days. And the essence is after 3 days, they revalidate, they'll get back to you, they will pay you, and they'll tell you that okay, it will take us maybe 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month to fix. So that after 1 month or 2 months, you can now do a YouTube video or publish it in one of these journals of a new finding around the vulnerabilities you saw on their system. All right. Without even mentioning the name of the company, most times they tell you that you should not disclose the company details, but you can use the information of that vulnerability and publish and all of that. So your dynamic application security testing most times happens after the application is already in production in use. Then you also have interactive application security testing. This actually combines your static application security test and your dynamic application security test, but it is more focused on application testing, performs analysis during any phase of the SDLC. All right. So during any of the phases of the SDLC, you can use interactive. So that means that you don't have to wait until the software is in production or use before you use both your static and dynamic. So that's why it's called interactive. Then the other one we have is our mobile application security testing. Basically enables mobile code to run through many analyzers focusing on issues specific to mobile applications. I've been able to do some mobile application security testing assessments using some tools. There are several tools out there. I mean, free to use tools. All right. And the applications you have on your phone, you can actually extract them as an APK file and then run them through it to see the weaknesses that are there. In fact, that is how you say Yahoo boys. Those guys are working. Some of the breaches that we found in the banking system today are done using the mobile apps that we have. All right. What happens is an attacker gets a copy of our mobile app, analyzes it, finds out all the APIs that are there, and tests them. Some of us, these APIs have their passwords and code encoded in the system or in the app. Lazy programmers. Right, so an attacker who has done their due diligence will find that and then be able to send transaction requests to our servers, and money is going out, and we're wondering how did it happen. Okay, so that is our mobile application security testing. Basically, it enables us to analyze our mobile codes through many analyzers. Now, you have your software composition analysis. So basically, it identifies your open source components with vulnerabilities and potential security and compliance threats. There's this thing that you would likely come across, maybe not in your exam, but at least as you proceed in this part of your career. It's called your S-born, H-born. Software build of material, hardware build of material. The one that is of interest to us is the software build of material. For every application, there should be an S-born that tells us all the sub codes and applications that are in use. All right. There is no application that is completely unique. That is from beginning to the end. It's the proprietary ownership. is proprietary owned by the developer. Most times we borrow from previous projects, other systems, open source APIs, and all of that. So your software composition analysis helps you to identify the open source components with vulnerabilities in your program so that you are aware, all right? And that's very important, so as to be able to know how to fix it. Some people have bought applications from vendors thinking that we are secure because this is a vendor program, no open source. But you'll be surprised how much, most softwares that you have, minimum, you have like 40 or 50% open source components. And that's why when we had, there was this crisis in 2022, 2021, and this Log4j, Java vulnerability. It affected primarily almost all applications because every application mostly use Java codes for logging data and also reading those data, and they didn't handle them well. So when Log4j came, it impacted on practically almost all organizations. But good enough, some workarounds started coming up, and if you were up to date with what's happening in information security, it was easy to get some of those fixes. All right, so it's always good to be able to know how much of your softwares have an open source components. Security Operations Center, SOC. A lot of us have actually either engaged or at least have heard of SOC before now. When we talk about SOC, most times it has to do with our incident handling team. For some of us, it is not called SOC, it's called incident response team and all the likes. But now, a team of IT security professionals who constantly monitor the enterprise IT infrastructure to catch security events in real time and address them effectively. That's what your SOC is really about. All right. Some of the common activities that you see in SOC is the maintaining of asset inventory. You can't protect what you don't even know exists. So for you to really protect your organization, you need to know what are all of the assets that we have. What are all of the assets that we have? Without that, you can't really do anything. All right. So maintaining asset inventory, managing security infrastructure, researching security solutions, all right, conducting information security testing. One of the beauty about being an IT security professional in any of the organization is that you can actually be carrying out penetration testing on your own environment, all right, testing all of your systems, your applications. In fact, for me, when I serve in the role of IT auditor or the head channels and IT audit, some of the tools I used were the tools I used for ethical hacking. And that's because even my organization, there was no budget for some of the other tools I needed for work. So I needed to get a workaround to ensure that I can carry out web application testing, carry out database testing. All the kind of audits I need to do. Okay, so it's always good for an IT security professional to be able to conduct internal security testing. Don't wait until you get a penetration tester. The penetration tester you are going to get most times might not even be as knowledgeable as you are, but you still get to pay them. And when you pay them, there are no guarantees they will find anything. All right, so it's just to say, okay, we've tested and we can't find. But doesn't mean that because they said they can't find that you are secured. Okay, so as an IT security professional, you need to be able to conduct information security testing, and that's what should happen within the SOC. All right, they should be able to monitor the IT infrastructure when they get alert events of interesting traffic, things that are happening. They need to carry out an investigation and triage for potential incidents. A lot of organizations have invested in SIEM solution, but they don't use it. In fact, in one of the places I worked, the SIEM solution was one of my major tools when doing my audit and reporting, because I want to be sure that whatever I'm going to be mentioning in my report or whatever I'm going to say in my report, I have the facts, I have the data to back it up. I would never take anybody to DC or put someone's name in a report who I can't substantiate by evidence that they are complacent or that they have a part to play. All right. So in your SOC, you also need to be able to manage patches on system upgrades and responding to incidents. What do we do? What's our incident response program? How do we run things? So all of these are things that should happen in our security operations center. Any question? Okay. So if there are no questions, we'll quickly move on to security monitoring logs, tools, and techniques. When it comes to information security monitoring provides several benefits, right? And the process of reviewing information to allow for detection of malicious activities by users, attempted systems, intrusions, and system failures. That's basically what information security monitoring is about. I have an opportunity to at least see things, and while it's not fun, it was a good learning experience for me because it gave me a visibility into the world of crime and how it works. All right. But then for every organization, your ability, your resilience is actually based on how well are you able to detect. A lot of times we place a lot of emphasis on prevention. I'm also big on that. The certification is big on that. It is better to prevent something wrong from happening than to detect it. But in reality, you can't prevent everything. There are some scenarios you can never have thought of. I mean, some scenarios that was not possible yesterday becomes possible today because of a new technology, because of a recent update or a recent patch that was pushed, that even though they did the proper testing, the testing was not exhaustive or could not even show us what would happen. All right. So things can go wrong just at the blink of an eye. All right. So, but having proper monitoring and detection in place helps us to reduce the damage. The earlier we detect, the less the damage. The later we detect, the more the damage that would have been caused. So monitoring provides several benefits, includes enforcing accountability. As I said, I don't write report. I never wrote report that I mention people without evidences. So the evidences can only come when you have monitoring systems in place. Promoting positive behavior. When people know that they are being monitored, even the worst of persons become good. I mean, in the bank, we had a system whereby we can see who viewed what account. And you don't want to receive a mail from the fraud desk, I mean, asking you or interrogating that, why did you view this person's account? Especially if you don't have any business. Because it means that you need to come and explain yourself to the disciplinary committee if the time comes. So once people know that the systems are being monitored, these types of actions are being frowned at, it promotes positive behavior, even in the worst of criminals. Now, another thing about monitoring is that it encourages the culture of compliance. Compliance becomes natural because they know that non-compliance will be spotted easily. Then also it supports investigations. I mean, a lot of times things go wrong. Management wants answers like yesterday. But imagine you don't have any monitoring system or mechanism in place. You don't have a SIM, you have no log aggregator, you have no visibility on your network, no visibility on your applications. There are no logs, there is nothing to investigate with. Then you really don't have anything to showcase to your management when things go wrong and you need to write a proper report. So your monitoring supports investigations and also identifying security problems. When you do proper monitoring or when proper monitoring is in place, it's easy for us to identify security problems and then come up with a solution, a workaround plan, all right, to mitigate such problems or weaknesses. Intrusion detection systems, we'll look at the categories, the components, and types. Your IDS is also the same as your IPS. The difference is one is detective, the other is preventive. Your intrusion detection system can either be network-based or host-based. For your network-based intrusion detection system, it's actually placed on the network to identify attacks within a monitored network. That is a set of devices that have that are bound by a similar IP range. All right. Now, for your host-based IDS, you are monitoring a particular system. So for that, you would install the IDS software on the system, and then it keeps sending notification to the administrative console about the health of that host. So while the network-based monitors a range of systems, your host-based monitors just one system. So you can have the host-based IDS installed on multiple systems. So it's not as if it's only one system you monitor, but per time, the host-based IDS monitors each system in which that IDS is installed on. Now, so we know that our IDS can either be network-based or host-based. The other thing we need to understand is that for your IDS to work, it has 4 unique components, and these are also the same for your IPS, I must say. All right, it has the sensors that collects the data. So for a network-based IDS, the sensor is placed at the network layer, and it fetches information about that network and all the devices on that network, both the traffic to inbound and outbound. All right. On the host, on that particular system, a sensor is installed that sends message to the analyzer and administrative console on the activities on that particular system or server or workstation, whatever type of system we're looking at, or whatever type of host we are looking at. So the sensor is one. Without the sensor, no data can be sent, and as such, you can't detect anything. Your IDS is useless without the sensors. Now, when the sensors collect data, it sends it to the servers where the analyzers receive the input from the sensor and then determine if the data they received is a signal of an intrusive activity or not. See if it's a signal of an intrusive activity or not. After that, you have the administrator console. That's where the IDS is being managed. That's where the notifications are being generated and sent to for the admin to take appropriate action. Then you have the user interface, all right, for the look and feel of how the things work. Then we have different types of IDS. We have signature-based. I know we've solved one question like this before. Your signature-based IDS is just like your signature-based antivirus or anti-malware. You are as good as your most recent signature you have. So basically, if you do not turn on auto updates for your signature-based IDS, it will not be able to detect most recent types of attacks. The statistical-based IDS uses patterns, the statistics of traffic events on your network to determine if there's a deviation from the normal way of or the normal traffic we see, then something could be wrong. So it uses statistics for determining an anomaly, while the neural network uses heuristic methods, all right, to be able to identify where there is a malicious or an intrusive form of attack, all right, on our systems or on our system. I don't know if anybody has a question. So Let's look at the features, the limitations, and policies around our IDS. Some of the features we have for IDS is that it can actually identify intrusions. It helps with evidence gathering. It can also have automated responses. So it sends mail to when there's an intrusion alert, it can send mail to administrators. It can pop up on the administrator's dashboard. Another thing that your IDF has is security policy. You can actually use it to implement some of your organization security policies. So if you have a policy that you do not allow unsecure communications like let's say telnet. So when a telnet traffic is coming in on your network at the IDS level, you can actually block it from either coming in or going out. So you can enforce security policies on your IDS. It also serves as an interface with system tools. All right. So with your IDS, you can actually integrate it with some other tools so that when there's an alert, you can integrate it to your, for example, your CRM, customer relation management platforms. You can relate it to your email platforms. You can integrate it, sorry, not relate, integrate it to your email platforms. You can integrate it to your workflow programs. All right, such as your Snow application for you can use it for managing incidents and all of that. So you can interface it with other system tools, and you can also use it for security policy management. Now, the limitation here is that weaknesses in policy definition because of it's not built just primarily for just policy definition. It's basically to identify anomalies, possible incidents, right? So, but it can do some policy management, but it's not built for that. So it has weaknesses in policy definition. Now, it's a layer 3 device most times. So it works basically on using IP address, port numbers. So, but not at the application level. So you can't configure the IDS to say block PowerPoint or block pornographic sites. Instead, you have things like your web application firewall, which works at the layer 7 of your OSI, which is the application layer, and can block traffic on the application layer based on application layer descriptions. So one of the limitations of your IDS is that application level vulnerabilities can flow through because it doesn't recognize it so well. And it's possible to have backdoors into applications. Then weaknesses in identification and authentication schemes are not going to be resolved with your IDS. Your IDS cannot verify the identity and authentication parameters. That's not its work. If you have things like your WAF, yeah, maybe, because your identification and authentication schemes work at the application layer. So that's any application that does security at that layer might be able to handle it, but your IDS cannot. Now, an IDS policy should establish security personnel actions in the event of an intruder, which may include terminating the access or tracing the access to the source, and then do some deep dive triaging. All right, these are the possibilities that we have. Now, the IPS, on the other hand, we said they are designed to detect attacks and also prevent the intended victims from being affected by the attack. All right, just like we had for IDS, your IPS can also be either host-based or network-based IPS. And then you now have your wireless IPS also. So these are just all types of IPS, which means that you can prevent intrusion either using installing the IPS on the host or on a network rack as a network-based IPS, or in this case, have it as a wireless access point of some sort for your wireless IPS. So rather than just the 2 modes of deployment for the IPS, we can have about 3. Now, honeypots, honey-nets. All right, these are just more like deception techniques. You want to deceive the attacker to believe that they're attacking your real system. So a honeypot pretends to be a vulnerable server that lures hackers but does not actively protect but does not actively protect networks. So you can have a high interactive or low interactive honeypots. All right. So basically, for the high interactive, you give a real-time environment feedback to the hacker. For the low interactive, it just emulates the production environment. You're really not interacting. So it helps you, because what you use your honeypots for is to get to know how will a potential attacker likely attack my organization. When you see their methodology, the tools they are using, then in your actual production environment, you can replicate these things and put controls to protect your production environment against these possible types of attacks. Now, a honeynet is multiple honeypots linked together to simulate a large network installation and allows investigators to observe the hacker's actions. All right, so with a honeynet, you can actually you can actually witness how an attacker would likely escalate privileges, move from one host to another, transversing your network. All right, when you understand their methodology, their ways of working, you can now protect your actual network from a possible attack of such. That's just the difference between your honeypot and your honeynet. One is just a single host. The other one is a simulated larger network of different honeypots linked together. When we look at our IDS, IPS in comparison, number one is scope. Your IDS is a monitoring tool built for detection and surveillance and will take minimal actions by itself. So when it detects a threat, so most times what it does is just to notify the admin. It can't really do things on its own. On the other hand, your IPS is a control-based solution. So it can either accept or reject network packets based on predefined rule sets. So your IPS can actually take action of dropping a packet or allowing the packet to go through. All right. Now, one of the drawbacks of the IPS, I must say here, is this. Before most organizations turn on the preventive actions of either accepting or rejecting network packets, it has to be monitored over time. If not, what happens is that you have a false rejection rate whereby legitimate traffics are being dropped by your IPS based on the rules you've set. Okay, so you have to find a fine balance between it. Then interactiveness. For IDS, you can't perform IPS jobs. They can't perform it, but they can your IPS can actually act as an IDS. So where it acts as an IDS will be a scenario whereby you've turned off the ability to either accept or reject network packets, which means that it would allow all traffic to go, but it will only notify the administrator. So the administrator will take note and then do further investigation. So your IDS cannot act as an IPS, but your IPS can act as an IDS. Now, the extent. An IDS can flag detected threats or anomalies and send them to a human security personnel for further action, which most likely might be your administrator. However, for your IPS, it can actually store the flow of that malicious traffic by either accepting or rejecting the packet. It can shut down the threat and prevent malicious packets from reaching that target while alerting security personnel. Okay, so your IPS is interactive. It can actually stop things and then notify the appropriate authorities. Now, in terms of location, your IDS can operate across enterprise network and monitor in real time. while your IPS operates in same location as your firewall most times. So it intercepts traffic where the internal network meets the external internet. So your IPS most times cannot just be on any point in the organization. All right, it's best with your firewall. Now, the range for your IDS, it can scan packets anywhere on the network. But for your IPS, it's limited compared to the IDS because it's best at the gateway near your firewall, okay? It can't just be anywhere on the network. Now, the level of human intervention for the IDS, it requires a dedicated human resource to deal with detected malicious traffic. However, IPS leverages a database of your threat signatures or machine learning behavior model so that it reduces the human interaction. It can actually take decisions to either reject or accept a traffic based on what it has learned over time. Now, for IDS, the configuration is in line. It's always in line of the traffic. But for your IPS, it's end host or inline mode behind the firewall. All right. So these are just a little comparison between our IDS and our IPS. I don't know. Do we have any questions?
Yes, I have a question, and I think I've been trying to actually think through this. So I don't know, but please permit me if you have spoken about it earlier on and maybe I didn't get it. I know usually, okay, based on my small understanding, is that there is also firewall, right?
Yeah.
So in the scheme of things, right? So I know at least that firewall is probably to prevent unauthorized access to networks, right?
Yeah.
In the scheme of things, where does the IDS IPS falls into? I'm just trying to see. So, if for instance, maybe if you can just give us a picture of how it really works to say, okay, this is the network, these are the system. Where does these two areas, where do they really fall into, right? Is this something that can be used together, right? Or if you have one, you necessarily don't need to have this one, right? I think I was not there. Then maybe when you describe it, if he answers the other thing I want to ask, then that. But if he does not, then I'll ask the other question. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the question. So we've not spoken much about firewall. I know I've mentioned it in passing, but we've not covered it yet. It's in the part A of the curriculum. I started the identification side of things, but I've not yet come to the network devices. So we would still talk more about firewall, the different types of firewall. But to answer your question, your firewall is actually a network device. It can be used with other network security devices like your IDS and your IPS. Now, the difference here is that for your IDS does not necessarily have to work directly with your firewall, but your IPS has to, because of the kind of work it's to do, because it needs to be able to make decisions of either blocking or accepting a traffic. And for it to do that, it might need to send a command to the firewall to block a port or block a particular IP address or block a particular port or IP address. So it has to work with the IPS. Now, in your exams, you will likely see scenarios where they're asking you if your IDS should be in front of your firewall or behind your firewall and the likes. Now, since we know that our firewall is a network security device, it's basically how do I put it now? It basically, you have different types. You have the ones that are rule based. Basically, you have your IP rules of allowed source and destination addresses, what traffic can come in, what traffic cannot come in. And when we talk about the different types of firewall, you find out that we have different types of firewalls that, yes, and I think I mentioned one today, which is the WAF, which is the Web Application Firewall. It operates at the layer 7, which is the application layer. Most of your or the traditional firewalls, don't let me say most of your firewalls, the traditional firewalls work at layer 3, and that's where your IP addressing is used and port number. So it can allow or block traffic based on IP address and ports. Now we have layer 4 firewalls also, which works at the transport layer, and so it can block based on things like either TCP or UDP and the likes. Okay, then the one that I mentioned, the WAF, which is the Web Application Firewall, is at the layer 7. All right, so it can block applications directly. Now, so the fact that you have a firewall doesn't mean you should not have anything else. I think that was one of the questions you asked. Having a firewall is good, and again, it's only as good as the person who configured it, because the rules are not sacrosanct. You need to understand, the administrator needs to understand your business, understand your environment, and understand risk. All right, to be able to know if the rules and controls, I mean, no, don't let me use the word controls now. The rules that has been set on the firewall will provide adequate controls, all right, for your environment. Now, I think we mentioned, but I'll mention again that we have different environments. When you have a network diagram, there's always the side that is the World Wide Web, the external network. You have no control over that. Where your crown jewels are majorly within your internal network. So most times you would always have a firewall, or you should have a firewall in front of your internal network. Then you should also have another firewall in just at the edge of your organization, your corporate organization outward. Then in between your front end is always called the front end and back end firewall. The back end firewall is the one closest to your internal network. Front end firewall is the one closest to the external network, the World Wide Web. In between is where you now have your demilitarized zone. And your DMZ is actually also seen as a no man's land. It's the point whereby you put things like your email server, your web application server, your web application server. That means a server that anyone who wants to know more about your company website is hosted there. Things that are public, all right, is hosted there. So your front end server should have a different set of rule to your back end server. Because if you have the same set of rules between your front end server and your back end server, people who should not get to your internal network will likely have access. But your front end server has lesser rules because you want people to be able to get to your email server, be able to send you mail, be able to access your web page, but not your core banking application or your core business application. All right. So your firewalls, as I said, is always as good as whoever configures them, and that's why they should always be reviewed regularly and have a fresh set of eyes on it. But the fact that you have a firewall should not prevent you from having an IDS or an IPS or any other security gadgets that you feel that would improve your security posture. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Any other question? All right, so if there are no other questions, thank you all for today. Hopefully we'll continue from here. Once we finish the part B, I'll go back to part A, and then we'll run it through. Let's see what we can do. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, and I hope I'll be able to at least provide answers